is being recorded, and this conversation is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel and can be shared and seen after this as well. So please encourage other members and friends to check this out if you enjoyed it as well. And if we are going to have questions at the end, you can see at the bottom panel that there's a Q&A button, and you can submit your questions at any time, and we'll get to them at the very end of this. And we're going to just have a conversation for a while. And if all the filmmakers could introduce themselves, we'll start with Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie Wen, and I'm the filmmaker for The Misfits.
And Mary, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I'm Mary Evangelista. I'm the director of La Gloria.
And Priscilla?
And I'm Priscilla Gonzalez Saenz, the director of the documentary Status Pending.
Charlotte, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Charlotte Benveniste. I'm the writer and director of Bye Bye Body.
And then we have some special guests here today. Would the Misfits please introduce themselves to everyone?
I'll go first. I'm Erica. I am the Misfits and the current captain for the team.
I'm Emma. I was head of software for the past 2 years. I'm now technically a college student.
I'm Claire. I'm the current director of electronics on the team.
I'm Lily. I'm the current head of marketing and shop manager.
Very cool. So great to have all of you. Thank you all for coming. It's an interesting group. I see a lot of, with the films themselves, I see a lot of connection to the narrative live action films, both aesthetically and in feel. And then I see a lot of connection to the two documentaries as well, in approach to intimacy and getting into a space for a long period of time, and really building relationships with the central figures, the Misfits, and in Status Pending as well. I wanted to start with La Gloria and Bye Bye Body, and just you both worked with film. You both have something that feels so personal and sincere, and something that feels very like lush and fleshed out. What was the inspiration for your film to start? And Mary, if you can go ahead and go first.
Sure. So La Gloria is written by Stephanie Adams Santos, who's a Guatemalan American, and we're both in Project Involve, which is this program that Film Independent runs. It's like 9 months long, and they put a bunch of filmmakers together, and we all have to make a film. And this story is very personal to her. It was inspired by her grandmother. We kind of like, wanted to do this thing together, both being queer and having very many similar like occurrences of being both like, I'm Filipino American, and there is like some Catholicism, voodoo stuff that kind of, there's similar stuff that happens in Philippine culture. So we bonded over these things with like the shaman kind of maternal figure that Gloria really needs. And I think it's something when we were talking about it, it's like, oh, this is a movie we wish we could have seen when we were growing up. Very conflicted and suffering from crushes and even deeper emotional sort of trauma. So
yeah, and that was with both of your films, the inside perspective of something that was lived in was so felt, and so it felt earned in both of your films. And Charlotte, with Bye Bye Body, what kind of brought you to Bye Bye Body? And again, but for the visuals of both your films, it's just amazing how they look and how lush they are. So thank you again. Charlotte, go ahead.
First of all, I loved all of your guys' movie, and it's really nice to meet you. It's like a bizarre way to see you guys, but hi. Yeah, I, similarly to Mary, I felt like I was sort of interested in broadening just the representations of like coming into sexuality that we see on screen. I feel like I just got really bored, frankly, of seeing like to sort of, like socially acceptably beautiful bodies like hooking up in the parents' bedroom of like a high school house party. That wasn't true to my experience, and that wasn't true to a lot of people that I know's experience. And I sort of, it obviously came from wanting to represent broader experiences on screen and also tell a story that felt really personal to me, and certainly to show like a variety of different bodies on screen, which I feel like we just don't often get to see.
There's sort of both your films have sort of a moment where there is kind of like a sexual experience that is happening, and it's interesting how that is sort of like a breaking point to something. It's just funny the arcs that's shared between both of your films. For Priscilla and Ellie, how did you start getting involved with each of your central figures, and how much time did you spend with the Misfits and with your group of lawyers from Status Pending? Priscilla, Ellie, you can start.
Yeah, so I guess having gone to undergrad and grad school in the Bay Area at Stanford, I've always been really inspired by seeing women in STEM, but also realizing that I just never really see them represented in film and media. And so I've always wanted to make something about that, or just representing that, but struggled to find like what would be the most visual way to capture that other than people like in front of their computers at a startup or something. So when I started looking into robotics teams, I found out about the Misfits, and I met them at Maker Faire, which is this amazing convention that celebrates like curiosity and engineering and building. And once I saw them doing a demonstration for other kids, I was just like, this needs to be a film. I want to code and build like after watching them, and hopefully other people will want to as well. And so yeah, that's how I met the Misfits. And I spent the entire robotics season with them. So that was actually started in the off season, just tagging along and following them, and they were very gracious to let me hang around their workshop for so long with my camera and sound equipment. But overall, I think it was about 9 months.
Yeah, so Status Pending features 5 immigration lawyers. They created an informal support group after all getting their start at a big law firm in Los Angeles, and then they've gone on to create their solo practices. But what really bonded them together, apart from that experience, was shared values and goals. They're all first-generation solo practitioners. They're American. And so the film takes us into the work and lives of what it's like to do their job right now, and also what their clients are going through. So it is through their lens, but we see specifically how some of the policies that have been changing over the last couple of years under the current administration are affecting their clients. My way into the film was a direct connection to one of the lawyers. Araceli is my sister. And so that was a direct connection. I was finishing up grad school, the same program as Ellie, the MFA in documentary at Stanford, and I moved back down to Southern California. And while I was trying to get settled, I actually started working at my sister's law firm that she had recently started, and just seeing, this was 2017, so seeing what it was like for her to not only just navigate the system where a form could be one thing one day and some, the next day there's changes and policy changes, just so much uncertainty, and seeing it in her clients as well. Through the questions they would call, text that are call because they saw something in the news and they didn't understand what was going on, or her having to make these difficult calls about somebody's case who's going to be totally different because there was a change in the law and now they have to re-strategize. And so while I was working with her, I found out about this awesome support group that she's a part of that I didn't know about. And these are her colleagues who they all sort of came up together and were in different places in their career at this time, but they still just had this incredible bond, and they text all day or they call or they email. They're all in different places of Los Angeles, so they can't necessarily meet up that often. And so that's my sisters Araceli Guerrero, it's Alma Puente, Gladys Uribe, Elizabeth Uribe, and Jose Osorio. And so they created this group. And when I found out about the group, I asked my sister if I could approach them about making this film about what was going on through their lens. And luckily, they all came on board. Actually, my sister was the last to come on board. And then we were able to make this film together. We did some test footage in 2018, but the majority of production happened between March 2019 to August 2019. So there were a lot of things going on last year. And it's really more of a portrait of what that experience is like to just sort of navigate without getting too much into the politics or the specific things, because it's mind-boggling. Yeah, just creating this portrait of support of first-generation Americans who have become successful and are giving back. And yeah, so I really appreciate that I was able to spend time with them in these really private spaces of their homes, but also the clients who agreed to let us come in and film these conversations that they were having in some really difficult times. So I feel really honored that I was able to spend that time with them and spend a lot of time with them. You know, they had to, I know they carved out a lot of time to be a part of this project too. So I appreciate that they wanted to get these stories out there. And it's almost like the more things that were happening, the more, you know, they were just eager to like talk about what was going on. So yeah.
The moment at the end when he's listening to the national anthem and they all get the news, and the juxtaposition of the text conversation that they have coming in, it's like this kind of silently celebratory but also kind of like heartbreaking moment, and it's just really well done. And for Mary, you I noticed some locations that feel familiar to me. What was the process of picking locations? Was that personal to the writer or to you? And is it a Coachella? Do you consider it a Coachella Valley based film, or is that just a location to be sort of a ominous sort of place?
Good question. And so actually, when we got the script, then we had to pitch to everybody on the team like how we would do it. And I had really wanted to put these Gloria and Xochitl and her brother in like a place where they hang out. And so I had said like, oh, what if they lived in the desert and they hang out in this place where it's like abandoned? And I had, you know, visited Salton Sea before, and it really kind of left an impression on me, and it just felt really perfect. And so that was quickly incorporated into the story, and then we went and location scouted and kind of figured out like, oh, this is where we want to do that dream sequence where she sees the little saint. And it was really fun because it was kind of like this thing where I was going to LA, or I was in LA, and then on the weekends we were going to Yucca Valley and Pioneer Town and all these places that were really fun. And it made me just like want to live there rather than in Los Angeles, actually. So.
For Charlotte, your sense of place is also, I'm curious about it. Where does Bye Bye Body take place? Is that a specific experience, or is that something that came more from imagination?
Yeah, it takes place in a weight loss camp, and it's sort of specifically a weight loss camp, and specifically sort of modeled after one that I was sent to when I was 12, and like sort of a hybrid of another one that I was then sent to when I was 17. I mean, and by sent to, I mean like begged to go when I was 12, because I was like so fucking brainwashed and like so desperately believed that like this was going to be like the key to my happiness, was to go to fat camp for 10 weeks in the summer and exercise for 9 hours a day. So it was definitely made in the image of that, or those camps. And then, yeah, the locations outside of the camp were sort of an accident, actually. We had initially wanted to shoot that hookup scene between Nina, our protagonist, and the young man who she eventually has a sexual encounter with, in these like shipping containers outside of my dad's cotton warehouse in Vernon, where he works. And we were like, we got there on the day and it was our last location. We had like 3 locations that day, and we were shooting with minors. So we were like really racing the clock because we had to be out by a certain time. And we get there and the shipping containers are gone. And I call my dad and I was like, Dad, where are the shipping containers? And he's like a very kind, sweet Turkish man, but he was like, I was washing them for you. And so they were just like in a completely different location. And so then it ended up being like a total accident that we ended up shooting inside the warehouse amongst these like massive sort of bags of tied down cotton, which ended up being sort of a really nice visual metaphor. It was like a really happy accident for us.
For the Misfits, spending time with Ellie, and then the group that ended up graduating and continuing on, how has it been being back at school with this with a film documenting your life and you're still kind of in it? And as the marketing, I imagine that's also been helpful for you, Lily, as well. So you just talking about having an active relationship with a document of your life while you're still sort of in the middle of it.
I remember when Ellie came to my school to film parts of it when she was interviewing Ryan. I was talking to her, and a lot of my friends were just walking by asking like, oh, what is she doing? Lily, what is this? What's going on here? And I explained, and they all thought it was really cool. But the documentary has been just so awesome to see, and I've gotten through I manage all of our social media, and through the documentary I've gotten to posting a lot about it, and we're getting a lot of really positive interaction just all across the board from different all-female organizations throughout the Bay Area, and it's been really, really cool to see how everyone's getting really interested in us.
Everyone, you can start submitting questions in the Q&A as well if you have any. And for Ellie and Priscilla, for your process of doing a documentary, obviously you're working with a lot of different moving parts. Is there a writing process that you go through, and what does that look like as far as sort of having an end game to it, or is it kind of a running document and sort of fluid for you?
For me, writing is actually really central to all of my work in documentary as well. I think that writing, even if it's a short treatment, is just like imperative, at least for me, to kind of get my head straight in terms of what is the story that I'm trying to tell. I mean, definitely so much of it is being in the field and then being in the edit room, piecing a story together. But I think it is important to spend time, whether it's like I call it, I guess for me, it's like there's like draft writing or just notes and stuff that you scribble and maybe never want to look at again. And then like the more official documents, like this is my treatment and this is the thing I'm sending out. But just to like get your head around the story that you're trying to tell, and really sort of those themes that you're going for. I think that really helps so that when you're in the field, you're able to like look for those things, or when you're interviewing or talking to people and they say something that you remember, like, something you had written down. And I think writing also just helps you imprint it in your brain. So writing is a huge part of it, just in terms of the story development. It's a huge part for me. I did a lot of writing even with my editor. We did storyboards. I was constantly updating an outline. So apart from the treatment, the ongoing document was this outline that kept changing. And then apart from the story development side of it that doesn't have to see the light of the world, there's definitely the written parts that do, the grant applications. And I was fortunate to be able to pitch to Tribeca Film Institute through the If Then program, and won the American West pitch. And so they came on and I worked with them. But that was an application, and I definitely applied to a lot of places and opportunities. And so writing continues to be a big part of it, even while you're still editing and figuring it out. But yeah, I definitely think it's great to have something, an anchor to hold on to sort of guide you. And yeah, writing is a big part of my process.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Priscilla. And actually, part of the program that we both attended for documentary film, I think most people don't really expect us to write treatments and plan what the film might be. I think people think documentary, you just roll the camera and see what happens. But there actually is a lot of benefit to trying to attempt to write down what the film might be. But something I didn't expect, well, I mean, I always knew the Misfits were incredibly amazing and badass and awesome. But in my treatment, I, was thinking about what might happen at the end of the season, and like, it's pretty like crazy chance that they will win like the whole competition. So I was like, okay, so they'll probably lose, and then it's going to be like not about winning, but about like being a team and just doing the thing and hopefully inspiring other people to do it too. And then of course they had to go and win it. And so then that was, amazing surprise and happy outcome for everybody. And it was great because then I realized, for this story, Emily talks about it in the film, but winning is validation. And it kind of is about winning, to show, these girls can do it just as good as anybody else. So that was a really happy accident and outcome of, and the great thing about not knowing what's going to happen.
For Mary and Charlotte, I talked about the how impressive just the visuals of your films are. Can you talk about how you work with your cinematographers, and then specifically working with film? And is that something that you had done a lot of beforehand, or something that was unique to this project?
I feel like I'm always going first, but yeah, I loved everybody's film too. Working with the DP is the question, and working with film. I mean, I love film. It just, because we had to be a little strategic budget wise. It was this thing where we felt like, where can we really like use it the most, if we can only use it a limited time. And so we left it all for the dream sequences, and which I think just added another kind of like dreamy quality to it, with all the grain, and actually you get to push the color and the textures more even in post. So that was really nice. Like, we shot the dream sequence day for night, so we shot it in the day, but then did in post, so it looks like it's nighttime. And working with Lorena Duran, who's an amazing DP and filmmaker, it's this thing where I think it's a lot of it is trust and instincts, and we kind of, it's a lot of talking about what images we both kind of like and inspire us, and then going to the actual place. And sometimes it's actually really doing the blocking and figuring out, like, if it's me and her sometimes saying some of the lines and being like, okay, then we cover it this way and that way. And I mean, that's how like hands-on I think we both are. And then she just has like great ideas that she comes up with, and I'm like, this is amazing, and you're taking it to another level. And we have this thing where LaGloria flips, and it's really odd because we shot this way before, or I think we hadn't yet seen Euphoria. So when I did see the TV show Euphoria, I was like, holy crap, this is amazing, this is awesome. That like there's so many people in this way thinking and doing things that are like fun and creative.
Yeah, just off of Mary's point, I feel like there is such a sort of a tactile organicity that comes from using actual celluloid, which I really felt watching your film, especially in that like beautiful bluey sort of purple dusky scene. It felt like it added so much to those dreams. For us, it was definitely an intentional choice. There was definitely like a time in my life where I was like an annoying film purist, where I was like, only film. And then really quickly abandoned that. But for this one, it actually felt important because it's so much about the body, and it is like a really tactile move. Like the subject is really tactile, so it kind of made sense for us to sort of have that organicity of film. And I got really lucky with my DP. I hadn't actually wanted to work with him initially. I was just trying to get introed to another DP. And then his like website was in the email signature, and I watched his reel and I was like, never mind, like, what are you doing in July? And we had a really, really like happy creative collaboration together. For me, it was really important not necessarily to be like, I just wanted to feel like I had a creative partner in him. And so what that meant for us in prep was like eating burritos and watching movies in my mom's basement all summer, and like kind of establishing a shorthand and also becoming friends, so that on the day I could really easily reference something that we had seen from a Claire Denis movie or a camera move. And he and I really designed together. And I felt like I was really careful about not wanting to sort of come in with sort of overly determined design, but to really sort of I felt like this kind of happened with all of my crew, and I really learned how beneficial it was for me, was just coming in with questions as opposed to like statements, and just letting people come in with their ideas. And most of the time their ideas are better than mine. It's like my DP inevitably knows more about light than I do. And likewise with my costume director, likewise with production design. It's like I obviously had a really clear vision, but it was really exciting to sort of let people bring their ideas to the table. And I was really happy with what Ben and I sort of came up with. We designed like very deliberately, because one of the consequences of shooting on film, especially ours, because Ben actually donated all of the film to the movie. He like saw my references and he was like, I have a refrigerator full of short ends and I'm going to give it to you, which also felt amazing to feel like you had someone who was invested in the film just as much as you. But obviously, which I'm sure Mary can attest to as well, and anyone else who has worked with film can say, you have to be, I mean, there's a limited amount of like physical material that you're working with, right? So you want to be extremely deliberate with what you're doing. So I actually really preferred that, because it was nice to have those formal restraints. It was nice to have to really think through what you were going to do on the day.
That's a like a really, actually, I'm going to bring in a question. I'm going to go to a question after that, but I'm going to bring in a question from Cheryl, which is just a simple question, which is, what is a DP? A DP is a director of photography who specifies in the camera. And then the question is, on a low budget, which I'm assuming is true of some of these films, how do you afford so many folks being a part of the production as indicated in the credits? So how do you afford, or how do you get people to be involved in your films when you have limited resources? If Priscilla wants to start.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How do you get, the question was, on a low budget, how do you get, if you are working with a low budget, how do you get enough people to be involved in the production of your film?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I know that I definitely had to ask people for discounts on working with me when I couldn't afford to pay someone's full price, which and even then, like, we made sure to set reasonable rates, like, and everyone who worked on the film, sound and camera and we made agreements ahead of time as to like what would be okay. Fortunately, I mean, I did have a grant from Tribeca, so I was able to pay for the film that way. But it was definitely still, making a 26-minute documentary. I mean, we definitely still had to be very careful. I have a great producing partner who was great at finding deals for color and sound and everything. And so it really helps to be working with people who have some of these connections and are willing and passionate about your film. Laura Reich is my producer. And so I had a lot of help that way. And really, when it comes to low budget filmmaking, a lot of it is doing it yourself as well. I mean, definitely as much as possible, we don't really always have PAs, especially, in doc. And sometimes you really can't have that many people on a shoot anyway. And especially now, things will definitely be different. So I would say a lot of it is through collaboration and with, because that, hopefully means that there's going to be people who are passionate about your project and can help. Definitely that's one side of it. Doing a lot of things on your own and really hustling to go out and find those deals. And also, if you're an emerging filmmaker or if it's one of your earlier films, I mean, collaborating with other people who are starting off too and seeing if they're willing to come on and work on your film at a lower rate, or making other sort of agreements. There's just so much, it's impossible to do it without collaboration. So that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Ellie, do you want to hop on that as well? And just curious from the, kind of get into the documentary, and then we'll go to the narrative after that.
Yeah, sure. So I made The Misfits as my thesis film at Stanford. So definitely did not have the ability, or we weren't supposed to hire a crew. So definitely the do-it-yourself method is always the best. So I was a director, producer, cinematographer, and editor. And then just on the shoots, it was always just me and my sound recordist, Inesh, which I think lent itself to a more intimate feeling as well. And hopefully being less obtrusive to what the girls were doing in the workshop and less distracting. But yeah, I was very fortunate that our documentary film program, basically it awards these fellowships to the students attending that basically covers our tuition. So we are responsible for fundraising for our productions, but I was lucky to get the UFBA Carol Fielding grant to cover a lot of the production. So yeah.
Charlotte, you wanna? Or Mary, go ahead.
I was really hoping I was going to get Mary to go first.
I mean, yeah, you can go. I feel like everyone, Priscilla, you really covered it well. We had a grant, and then we had sponsors as well, because this was made through Project Involve. So we had really good producers who were finding companies that could match our the donations that we were getting from family and friends, and we were able to get people on board, friends who are who work in LA, to do it for a lower rate and that sort of thing.
Yeah, nothing that novel to add, except just, to ask for things, to like be willing and confident enough to ask for things, which I feel like we're taught not to do maybe. And it's always surprising how willing people are to say yes to you if you kind of make a convincing argument and you're willing to ask. Like, we asked Panavision for our camera and they gave it to us for next to nothing, because there were so few people that were shooting 35 and they had a bunch of old 35 cameras around. So that was how we made that happen. We had like student rates on all of our processing, and for production itself, it's like half the crew was staying with me, like on the floor and couch of like my friend's apartment. And I think part of your job as a director is, obviously this is so different with documentary, where it really genuinely seems like you guys were helped by not having such a big crew, right? I feel like it sort of made it able for you to get access in certain spaces. But yeah, we were really lucky that people were willing to work for nothing. And part of our jobs, I feel like, as directors or filmmakers, is to sort of like inspire people to get on board with you, and to sort of communicate your vision, whether it be getting a grant or, yeah, convincing people face to face.
I always really appreciate, especially with filmmakers now, because it seems to be so much more of important and growing in importance with each ShortFest that happens, and conversations about vulnerability and like emotional intelligence, especially coming from a director, and especially with La Gloria and Bye Bye Body, there's something that feels like it's on the line. It feels like there's something at stake. It feels like there's something dangerous, and it feels like there's something that's very personal that's being communicated. And then with Status Pending and the Misfits, obviously there's something on the line. You're working with real people and you're building relationships that you really care about. And it's, I know that just in my brief experience of working with students, like they mean the world to me, and so like, I can only imagine what those bonds are. But I guess I'm really curious about your relationships to vulnerability on set with crew, and that kind of internal process when you're going through making a film and leading. See, Ellie, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think that's such a lovely question, and I really just have to thank the Misfits and their families and the mentors, like just everyone, for really welcoming me in as family. I feel like from the day I stepped into their workshop, they were just really open and welcoming, and also knew that I was like on their team as well, like on their side. So I think we established a nice level of trust, but the film really wouldn't have been possible if they didn't open up and share and have all these great conversations with me. So I really think it's a two-way street, and so I'm really thankful. And I noticed a great question in the Q&A. I don't know if maybe now is a good time to bring it up, but Amy asked if the Misfits felt more stress being filmed while hyper-focused on design and competition. And I was curious how you guys did feel about that.
I think that's pertinent to this too. So yeah, go ahead, Misfits.
Okay, I'll go. Actually, I want to first correct myself. I said that I was just captain. I'm actually co-captain. I have Emily is my co-captain, if you remember from the film. So about this question, I remember the last day so very well, and Ellie was there filming the last day, which is called Bag Day, and you basically bag the robot. You can't work on it anymore before the competition, and that was one of the most stressful days. And I personally at that time I was like, I don't want to be filmed, because me under stress is not a pretty sight, and I can see this repeatedly, whether it was that day or like throughout my high school career. So I think it was interesting to look back, because that scene is in the film, and I was like, wow, I do not look good during this time at all, and I do not sound good. But I think that it was an interesting kind of time to see like how I can balance myself, and how I can really like kind of let it go, right? Because this is just one day, and this is just one time of my life, and I think it was like a good learning experience to see like how can I grow from that, and how can I adapt, and how can I treat people better when I am under stressful situations, because I definitely was not treating people kindly or respectively during that time.
Yeah, or do you want to go, Claire?
That's fine, Emma.
Okay. I also remember Bag Day really clearly. There was like something wrong with the electronics board on the robot, and we had like 15 minutes to figure it out before we had to bag the robot. So me and Erica, and I think Claire too, we're all trying to work on it at once, and it was very stressful. And we're like, yelling things at each other and grabbing things, and Ellie was trying to like shove microphones onto us. And I think, yeah, like what Erica was saying, it taught me a lot about like trying to stay calm and not just like go crazy because I was being filmed.
I mean, yeah, like in general, just to add on to what Erica and Emma said, like I guess like art and documentaries and stuff, there's just like capturing moments in time and preserving them for like, you know, um, and for us, I think I mean, for us, it's like that it's like our high school years of our life. We're all kind of like not in the best mindsets at all times, and so getting to like getting the ability to like see what we were like and our temperaments were, and especially while we're like busy trying to do like electronic sports at the last minute, getting to see that is a real privilege, and I'm just eternally grateful to Ellie for like capturing all those moments. And yeah, like also to add on to what Emma and Erica said, it's it can be stressful at times, but also it's more like during the less stressful times there's more of just like a presence, like I just like felt Ellie there, and yeah, it was really nice to have her there.
Um, I didn't necessarily feel more stressed when Ellie was filming us, mainly because I just thought what I was doing was really boring and that it wouldn't be interesting for people to see. Because she would follow me around for like 20 minutes of me just chopping like metal and wood, and I'm just like, this is not what I think is interesting to watch. And she'd like stick a mic down my shirt, and I'm like, this is a very loud power saw. I don't know if you want to hear this. So maybe this is just my experience, but I didn't necessarily feel more stressed, more than I just thought it was not going to be very interesting part of, like, it wasn't the like action shot that you see at competition. It was more of just, I'm gonna stand here for 20 minutes and chop metal into like 3-inch bits. That's about it.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah. It's kind of a good litmus test to the question at hand, anyways. How did the Misfits feel about being in that environment? So, Priscilla, how was your relationship with? I mean, it's like there's so much that's on the line with your film. So, is that hard to navigate and manage, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because it's such a layered, I think, experience on both ends. I think earlier on, even just going through grad school, I always felt like I was imposing on people when I was in a room with a camera, and I am. When you have the camera, you do have the power in that situation, because you're recording somebody else. It's a document. Which can be great, and it can also be negative. I mean, I also love what Claire said, that it's like documenting a moment in time and looking at it. And I think that was really beautiful, that you experienced that. So I was glad to hear that. But it is definitely a vulnerable situation to be in front of the camera, and I think it's like these unspoken or spoken contracts that you make with people, these social contracts of like, they're trusting you because you're the professional, and you do need to come into the room knowing what you're doing and being in control of the camera and of your crew, and of how things are going to happen on set that day as much as possible. And I think that helps to make them feel comfortable, or people on camera, when they see you in charge of and doing your job. And so, but in terms of the vulnerability, I mean, I couldn't even, speak too much to what their experience is, but for the lawyers, I mean, this is their career. So they and it becomes a document. So of course they had to be very careful about what was presented in the film, and how they said things, and how they presented situations when they were explaining things to me in interviews and that sort of thing. And sometimes that was a little difficult to then get deeper, and that took some time for us to develop that relationship. And eventually, we got there. But I fortunately was able to spend a lot of time with them filming, because we had established trust that if I filmed something that was not okay to be on camera, it was not going to be in the film. And so rather than stopping everything going on, I was allowed to be in the room, and we had that trust. And we talked about it before, we talked about it throughout the process, and definitely when we had a cut of the film, to make sure that we weren't putting anybody in danger, in terms of, I mean, in danger, well, the clients especially, but also just that they felt like what we were presented wasn't going to harm anybody now or in the future. And the clients who participated, I would say, really have, you know, the biggest risk as well, because these are, you know, their cases, and you know, this could serve, you know, something that is filmed could end up in a court case, you know, if needed. So there's definitely just so many layers to it. And I would say, to try to articulate it a little more clearly, definitely with the most vulnerable communities, which in this case would be the clients, I think it's very important for there to be somebody else. And in this case, the lawyers were talking to their clients about the project and asking if they would be involved. And I thought that, and I think that's great. And I'm glad that it worked out that way. In my last film, I also filmed people in very vulnerable situations. They had immigrants who had just been released from detention centers, and it was the same way. Their contact person who helped them was the person who spoke to them about the project. And we didn't talk until they said they would participate. And so I think that's really important. You know, I can't pretend that I can convince anybody to trust me. Even, you know, trust is earned, and also, you know, through someone that they trust, who said, you know, would you be willing to tell your story on camera with this filmmaker? So it's definitely a very layered situation. And what just really helps is when you have that trust, and they know that, you know, if there's something that's not going to be okay, it's not going to end up in the film, it really opens up the possibilities for you to be there and capture the things that, as the filmmaker and the storyteller, you know, are going to make the story that you're trying to tell. And yeah, I also, just in terms of the legality of everything, I also did check in with some outside lawyers to make sure that, you know, I wasn't, again, presenting anything that could be harmful to the lawyers in my film or to the clients in the film as well. So there's a lot of consulting involved as well when portraying really delicate situations like these. And definitely, I mean, the central tenet to documentary is do no harm. And, you know, I think that's just central to the work that we do. And yeah, it's a really, yeah, there's so many layers to it, but it's definitely like central to, I think, how we proceed, you know, making sure that people are comfortable and yeah, not doing no harm to anybody. Yeah.
For Mary and Charlotte, I know it's a little bit different as far as, you know, you're working with actors, you're working with your writer, it's personal to you, you're on set, there's a million different things going on when you're on set, but same kind of direction of question. I'm really curious about your relationships to that.
Yeah, certainly do no harm was a operating principle for us as well in every single thing that we were doing, primarily because we were working with non-actors. So all of our cast are street cast, and so being really thoughtful about the way that I approached those people on the street. Certainly, had I been 15 or 16 years old and someone had approached me at the time about being in a movie about weight loss camp, that would have been traumatizing to me in a lot of ways. So trying to be really careful about how we reached out to people. So what that meant was reaching out to people who on Instagram, for example, who had embraced fat as a part of their own identity and didn't feel shame around that word, for example. And then on the day, obviously, we were putting people in potentially compromising situations. And so what that meant for us was Kat Christensen, our lead, she and I spent a lot of time sort of talking about that scene. And then we rehearsed that scene at length with a stunt coordinator to make sure that everybody felt comfortable on the day, and that everything felt really, really rehearsed, and that we did that scene sort of as you would a stunt. So everyone knew where they were putting their hands. And And then obviously just really, really trying to protect the space. So what that meant when we were shooting that scene in particular was that anybody who didn't need to be there wasn't there. And you know, I agree that it's your job as the director to sort of set the tone of how your set's going to go. And so that responsibility fell on me to sort of talk at great length with our crew about the tenor of our set and how I wanted people to be spoken to. And it's kind of amazing. It's like when you sort of just lead by example, people are just kind of willing to follow along. It's people are always sort of, I think, make film ethics feel weirdly confusing. It's just like, be a good person and like communicate to people and like set boundaries and rules. Those are there for a reason. And they're your job to do. Nobody should feel compromised on a set like that. So that was really important to us for sure.
That's exactly right. Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is vulnerability, and I think because this project was kind of a long time coming, the core crew and cast. Well, Chris Griss, who plays Gloria, she's actually a really good friend of mine, and so that really helps to have. She's one of my best friends, so it kind of just helps to have someone that you already kind of know, and she's also a filmmaker, so there's a little bit of shorthand there, but always, of course, making sure that she's comfortable. The scene with Michelle Padilla, where it's kind of dreamy and they're making out and all of that. I had a shot list already, so they were comfortable being like, okay, now we do this, now we do that, because it can get a little hairy if you don't have a plan, especially with like a sexy scene like that. And then the grandmother, Antonia, is played by Stephanie's mother. And that was always, it was something that I had always wanted. And it was something where we had to change, we had to move our dates, and luckily she was available. And this is based on her mother, so there's already kind of a wisdom, and she's already embodying so much of her mother in this way that it always kind of felt true and felt right. And so for me, it was important to have Stephanie on set, to especially doing her mom scene, and checking in and being like, how does that feel? Did that feel true? And then also to talk, and also to have Stephanie tell me like, yeah, that's great. And then she can actually go directly to her mom and be like, maybe say this word less, because I like, for me, that is, that's kind of better, so that she feels comfortable with me, who is more of a stranger. But it was this thing where I think, we were all going through crazy life stuff, and everybody's cards were out. And I think once, like you said, having your cards out and being honest about like where things are coming from, it always makes it set run a little bit smoother. So
we're going to start closing it out. I have a question from David, and then if anybody, we can probably do one question after this as well from the members. So I have a question from David to Priscilla, and then we'll just kind of extrapolate that to everybody. Priscilla, what's next for you? You did such an excellent job telling the stories of the lawyers and their clients. Will you be doing anything more with them, or do you have any other projects in the works? And then we can just kind of what everyone is looking at next and working on, or if you're able to work right now, and so on and so forth. So Priscilla, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much, David Sperling. I really appreciate that. There's, we've had conversations about it. I would love to make another film with the group. In particular, as we're heading towards an election, I think it would be, very interesting to show what it looks like after the election, because even if there is a new administration, it doesn't mean that things are going to automatically be better or even good. It'll be a process. And I think that's another very specific story that through the lens of this group, they could just offer a lot of insight as to, what that's going to look like and how that's going to affect their clients, if they're still working maybe with some of the same clients. But the idea, I think, would be to present just another chapter, another time, and now what they're dealing with and what their, other clients and new problems. So I would be really interested. I still need to hash that out with them and see if they would be interested, but I hope they would be. Definitely, though, there's a lot to contend with right now with COVID and just how things are going to change. And so, of course, understanding that we're going to be having a lot of conversations with people that are, who we want to work with and film about, if we move forward, how we would do that safely and what that would look like. And maybe our films are going to start looking a little different, but the most important thing would be safety. Yeah, and then other than that, I'm co-writing a short animated film with a friend that's going to be related to immigration through children's perspectives. And I'm also working on another doc with a colleague called Expanding Sanctuary. And yeah, just a few other projects in the works while we figure out kind of how we're gonna, all of us will proceed safely with filmmaking once we're back. So, and thank you everybody. Your films were great, and thank you Palm Springs and Zach and everyone. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Charlotte and Mary, I know that it's both of you have features in development, right? Charlotte, how's what's that looking like right now?
It's looking like me like trying to sit down at my desk and then just not being able to write anything, which feels fine at the moment. It's hard to focus on filmmaking at the moment. It just feels like sort of the least of our worries right now. So it feels slightly irrelevant, but at the same time, it's nice to be on a panel like this where I see so many great films and get to meet the Misfits, who I'm such a big fan of now. I loved your guys' movie so much, and just feel inspired and sort of recommitted to the potential that film has to sort of change hearts and minds. So it's a bizarre time to be participating in a festival, but also kind of a great time because it feels like a really good and important time to be reminded of the potency of film. So we'll see what happens with my feature, but yeah, I'm not the most focused on my own film right now. But just to say again, thanks to all of you guys, and I really, really enjoyed your films, and yeah. And I actually, sorry, I just have to tap out slightly early. I want to hear what everyone is up to, but I actually am going to a protest in Palmdale right now, which is an hour away. Oh. So I'm going to just tap out, but it was a real pleasure to meet you guys, and keep on keeping on. And I hope to see you guys all soon. Thank you so much, Zach. Bye guys. See ya.
Yeah, Mary, go.
I should go too because I have another Q&A for a different festival. But very quickly, I am working on a feature in development, and it's same thing like Charlotte. It's pretty hard to do, and writing for grants and all of that. But I'm also with Stephanie. We're working on just like initial talking and trying to figure out how we can make a queer horror feature. So that's something that we're looking forward to working on together.
Awesome. Mary, if you got to get going, feel absolutely free. Okay. And
bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Your films were beautiful.
I love
the Misfits. Keep it up. All right. Bye.
Bye, Mary.
And then Ellie and the Misfits. I especially want to hear what the Misfits are up to. But you too, Ellie. Ellie, what's coming up for you in the future?
Yeah. So graduated from the film program last year, and then moved to San Francisco, and I'm now I started at the beginning of the year this film house residency with SF Film, which is a great organization, and really appreciate them. And I'm just trying to develop my next project, which is currently in flux because of COVID and everything. So can't say much more about what that is, but I would love to hear what the Misfits are up to too. And so did somebody from the Q&A.
Erica, do you want to start us off? What's going on for you next?
Yeah, so I am a rising senior in high school. So that means another year of hard work and college applications and all of the good stuff. So I think it's an interesting time to be a senior in high school, especially with a lot of uncertainty and the fact that like schools might not actually be in session for the upcoming school year. So there is a lot of uncertainty, so it's hard to really see and gauge like, oh, we might not even have a competition season next year, or it might be very different because a lot about the competitions for robotics is that a lot of these teams are we're all together in a enclosed space competing against each other, and that might not happen. We might have to be more separated because of social distancing and all of that. So during this time of uncertainty, I think like for me currently, I'm trying to just learn as much as possible and really educate myself on the issues that we are currently facing, both in terms of racism and in terms of science and public health, and how that can be improved in the future so we don't have to face these kind of certain things again.
I just graduated from high school, or I received my cap and gown in the mail, but so if like school ends up happening in the fall, I will be moving across the country to go to Tufts University in the School of Engineering. So yeah, looking forward to that. If it happens, I might be in my room on Zoom, but yeah, and so there's a lot of things I'm unsure about because we don't really know what's going on, but I've just been hanging out, talking to friends, knitting hats.
From more of a team standpoint, we have a lot of really fun projects going on right now with our electronics kit, and we have a host. We are doing a lot of recruiting right now because a lot of our team is part of the class of 2021. So after we graduate, we need people to, keep the team going. And that's what I've been working a lot on right now, trying to just get our name out there to a lot of places. So I've been trying to make my way into a lot of school functions right now to try and see who's interested, because we're not a school team, which makes recruiting really interesting, because normally you can just put up flyers all around school and say, oh, meet us in this room at this time and we'll have a meeting. But since we're not one school, we all commute from all over the Bay Area to our one workshop. So recruiting is a very interesting time because you need to find someone who's dedicated enough to even drive to your workshop, which is surprisingly difficult to find.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a rising senior right now, and like Erica said, a big part of being a rising senior, especially in fall, is college applications. And so for me, a big part of that is deciding what I want to pursue. And so I've been interested in STEM for a really long time, but for like the past few years, is like since 6th grade or something, I've been really interested in photography, and that's recently evolved into cinematography. So I'm interested in becoming a DP. And yeah, so right now I'm like educating myself on like so many movies. I'm watching like so many explainers and just as many movies as I can, and just like trying to research like famous DPs and just trying to see what I like. And so another part of that is I'm taking an art class right now just so I can get a more formed or more developed eye, I guess, for art and stuff like that. And yeah, as for robotics goes, I'm trying to make sure that electronics, or at least that sub-team in itself, is well defined so that new people can come up, like Lily said, with recruitment. And
Awesome, Claire. If you want if you want to watch some shorts, I can send some shorts your way as well if you're interested.
yes,
So
please.
yeah, absolutely. What a good note to end on. Thank you everybody so much for being here. Appreciate all of you, to all the members. Thank you for joining us for this long. Yeah, that's I think we can wrap it up here. So thank you everybody again for making the time. I appreciate all of you so much, and thank you for your films.
Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you.
us together,
Thank
Zach.
you.
Thanks
for
so
having
much.
us.
Great to meet you, Misfits.
Nice to meet you too.
All right, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.